All right, let's dive into one of Shakespeare's most intense plays. We're heading to Venice, a bustling city of trade and tension. This is a story that starts with a simple loan between friends, but quickly spirals into this high-stakes battle between justice, mercy, and pure, cold-blooded revenge.
But before we get into the characters, just think about this for a second. Imagine you need money, badly, but the only person who will lend it to you sets a terrifying condition. If you miss the payment, he doesn't want money. He wants to carve a pound of flesh from your body. That gruesome, insane bargain is the ticking time bomb at the very heart of this story.
So, where does it all begin? Well, like a lot of great stories, it starts with two age-old problems. One friend is heartsick, and the other is flat broke.
Okay, so meet our main guys. First, there's Antonio. He's a successful merchant, he's got it all, but for some reason he's just sad. He can't even explain why. Then you've got his best friend, Bassanio. Bassanio's problem is a little more straightforward. He's completely fallen for this incredibly wealthy and smart heiress named Portia, but he doesn't have a cent to his name. He can't even afford to travel to see her and try to win her over.
Antonio, being a great friend, wants to help. But this decision is going to lead them both down a really dark road, forcing them to make a deal with the one man in Venice who truly despises them. See, all of Antonio's own money is tied up in his merchant ships, which are out at sea. So, to get cash for Bassanio, he has to go to a moneylender. And not just any moneylender. He goes to Shylock. Now, there is some serious bad blood between these two. Antonio has publicly spit on Shylock and condemned him for charging interest. Shylock, in turn, hates Antonio for his arrogance and for hurting his business. The hatred here is deep and it is very, very mutual.
And this brings us to the deal itself, the infamous bond. Shylock says, you know what? I'll give you the loan, and I won't even charge you interest. But there's a catch, and it's a terrifying one. If Antonio doesn't repay the loan in exactly 3 months, Shylock will have the legal right to cut 1 pound of flesh from Antonio's body. And Antonio, who is so sure his ships will be back in time, he actually laughs it off. He agrees to the deal.
Okay, so while Antonio is literally gambling with his life back in Venice, a completely different kind of gamble is going on over in the ritzy estate of Belmont. This is where Portia lives, and any man who wants to marry her has to pass a very unusual test.
So here's the deal. Portia's father set this up before he died. Suitors have to choose between 3 chests, 1 gold, 1 silver, and 1 lead. Inside one is Portia's picture, and whoever picks it wins her hand. Well, all these princes and rich guys have been showing up and picking the flashy gold and silver caskets, which are all about surface-level appearances, and they all fail. But then Bassanio arrives. He gets that true value isn't always on the outside, and he chooses the humble lead casket. And he's right, he wins Portia.
But just as they're celebrating, some absolutely devastating news arrives from Venice. That terrible bargain Antonio made, the clock has just run out. It's the worst news possible. A report comes in that every single one of Antonio's ships, all his wealth, his entire business, has been destroyed in a storm at sea. He is completely, totally ruined. There is no way he can repay the loan. The fallout is immediate. Shylock, hearing the news, is not interested in money anymore, even though Bassanio now offers to pay him back many times over. Nope, Shylock is fueled by revenge. He demands the contract be honored. He wants his pound of flesh. And because the bond is legally binding, Antonio is arrested and thrown in jail to await the sentence. And this is it. The whole story now comes down to a single tense courtroom scene. This isn't a trial about money. It's a trial for a man's life. Just when it seems like all hope is lost, this brilliant young lawyer shows up, seemingly out of nowhere, to argue Antonio's case. And of course, nobody in that courtroom has a clue that this legal genius is actually Portia, who is raced from Belmont in disguise to save her new husband's best friend. The Duke of Venice, who's presiding over the court, he pleads with Shylock to show some mercy. Bassanio offers him double, triple, 6 times the amount of the original loan. But Shylock won't budge. He just keeps repeating it over and over. I will have my bond. This is about revenge, plain and simple.
So Portia, still in her lawyer disguise, tries a different tactic. She gives one of the most famous speeches in all of literature, arguing that mercy is a divine quality, something that should always temper the cold, hard letter of the law. But Shylock is completely unmoved. His response is just ice cold. He says, "I crave the law." He doesn't care about mercy. He wants what the law says is rightfully his. At this point, it looks like it's all over for Antonio. And then comes the twist. Portia says, "Okay, the law is the law. Prepare to cut the pound of flesh." Shylock is thrilled. He's even sharpening his knife. But just as he moves toward Antonio, Portia stops him. She says, "Wait a minute. The bond entitles you to a pound of flesh, but it says nothing about blood." She explains that if he spills a single drop of a Venetian citizen's blood, he'll be executed. He's been trapped by his own cruel, literal reading of the contract. So Antonio is saved. It's an incredible victory, but it's a complicated one. And for the man who lost, the consequences are absolutely devastating. Shylock doesn't just lose his case, he loses everything. Because he threatened the life of a Venetian citizen, the court rules that he has to forfeit his entire fortune. And then, as a condition to spare his life, Antonio demands one more thing, that Shylock must convert to Christianity. He's stripped of his money, his revenge, his power, and even his faith. It's total ruin. And what about everyone else? Well, on the surface, it's a picture-perfect happy ending. Bassanio and Portia are reunited, everyone finds out about her clever disguise, and then, to top it all off, word arrives that Antonio's ships weren't lost after all. They've come home safe, full of riches. Everything seems perfectly wrapped up. The story leaves us with this really tough question, doesn't it? Antonio's life was saved, for sure. But the sentence against Shylock, was that really justice? Or was it just a different kind of revenge, one that was sanctioned by the law? The play might end with laughter and celebration, but it forces us to ask some pretty uncomfortable questions about prejudice, mercy, and what justice even means when it's totally stripped of compassion.